in the last tutorial, you would have just started to add your NPC. You would have added your very first NPC. Now, I will add a second NPC right now, just to go over the process again. We can select where we want the NPC to appear. Probably I will put the NPC somewhere near the start area, maybe just next to the NPC we added before. So we can go to the location, double click it, add gameplay prefabs, and then add NPC here. Okay, so we got two NPCs which currently look identical. Okay, now I want to change that NPC's dialogue, so I click on inspector, and if we scroll down, you can see if I navigate to this particular NPC, you can see that NPC has a conversation which simply says hello for the time being. It's called A1. Okay, so I'll explain a little bit about how conversations work. I'll make a new tab. Now, in a game, we have a conversation tree, something like this. So the first thing the character might say, for example, could be called 1.0, and it would be, what brings you to these parts, stranger? Okay, that can be the very first line of dialogue that this NPC says. Okay, I can duplicate that and drag it over here. This will be 1.2, so it will be the second line of dialogue that is said. And this is the response which the player says. Now, it's important to label each of your responses like so. And the player character can say, I am here for adventure. Once again, we can duplicate this and bring it over here. And we can say 1.2, which is the second option for the player character to respond. And that could be, I seek solitude. Okay, and now we can take these and place them inside the game. So the NPC, currently he's saying hello. Now I don't want him to say hello. I can remove that and I can add a new one by clicking the little plus here. Okay, and then I can edit what he's going to say. So the ID for this one, remember we're numbering them, and the text will be what the character says. So I'm going to paste, what brings you to these parts, stranger? Okay, so now that we've created the first item of conversation for this character, then we can click edit and we can add branches. Okay, so we'll add 2, 1 and 2. So we had, I am here for adventure. I can take that and paste that as the first branch. And you might remember the second one was, I seek solitude. So we can take that and paste that in as well over here. Okay, so now we've got a question and 2 possible responses from the player. That's the basics of conversation trees. So we'll hit update. Now, the next thing we want to do is we want to make 1.1, which is the first response that this character will say to the player. So we can add that by clicking underneath here. Okay, then we can add the next line of conversation. And again, we can give it an ID. Let's call it 1.1. This will be what the NPC says in response to the first line of dialogue, which is, I seek adventure. And then the character will say, great, can you search for my lost dragon? Okay, so that's the first of the responses. And we'll add the second one, 1.2, which will come if the player says, I seek solitude. And then the NPC says, I can't help you there. And then we can create that. All we need to do next is we will click on edit on item number 1 of our conversation. Now, remember when our character says, I am here for adventure, we want the NPC to say, great, can you search for my lost dragon? So we need to label it. Since it is 1.1, we'll make this 1.1. And when our NPC says, I seek solitude, the NPC will say, I can't help you there, which is 1.2. Important to label and have a clearly organized system of conversations, because as you can imagine, they can get out of control. So now we hit update, and then let's just enter play mode and see how it goes. So we approach the NPC, and the NPC says the dialogue. Now, just one thing to remember, you need to use the left and right buttons to scroll through the conversation options and use space to select an option. Okay, and he's responded just like he should.